All right, welcome back to the show. Today, it's Crystal Ball Day. We'll be talking about what we anticipate will be happening in all things real estate in 2025. We know it's going to be a good one. We always, kind of giggle and joke around when we do these because we'll make some predictions that are right. And then there'll probably be some things in a year when we listen back to this and do our recap episode where we're like, wow, we can't believe we said that. But yeah, we just got off recording our last episode, which was our 2024 recap. So definitely some things came out of left field of that we weren't anticipating to happen, but also fun to kind of go back on our predictions and see what came true and what didn't. As always, guys, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute any legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. It is not intended to cause or induce breach of any existing agency agreement. And of course, if you're not subscribed, please remember to do so and leave us a 5-star review. We really do appreciate it. But now let's hop into another episode of the Full Subjects podcast. All right, welcome back to the show. It's crystal ball time. Cole, let's get it started. What is 2025 going to look like? We always talk about rates. I feel like we always talk about rates first. What's going to happen with rates?
I wish I could tell you, but I don't know. Do we think rates are going to go to those lows that we saw back in the pandemic?
Yeah.
If I believe that.
People renewing again at 16, 17. You don't think that's going to happen?
That would make my life great, to be honest with me. And my phones would be blowing up if we could get rates like that again. Because not only would it be the renewal people, it'd be all the people starting to jump back in the market again, right?
Yeah, jeez.
If I can borrow at 1.5%, man, I'll take the biggest mortgage I can get, right? But no, in all seriousness, last episode we talked about what happened with variable rates specifically. We're going to continue to likely see variable rates come down. The majority of economists and anybody that kind of works in this space are expecting us to see still at least another 3/4 of a percentage point rate drop by about mid of 2025. So that's my prediction because simply it's expected. So that's not really fair for me to say that, but it's likely we're going to see another close to 1% drop by the middle of 2025. There's some banks or some economists even thinking we'll go lower than that. Maybe not by that point, but throughout the year. What I'm curious to see is what is the floor for this? Like, how low are they willing to take it? And are we going to get to a point where things start to shift the other way, or are we going to start seeing some stabilized rates? So I'm hoping, and my prediction is that we'll see probably 3 more rate cuts, 3/4 point rate cuts by the middle of the year. And I don't have the schedule in front of me here, but I'll
pull it up.
I think it's end of January is the first one. I think it's like January 29th. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one in January. The next announcement will then be March, and then there'll probably be one in maybe the end of April, if not early May. I wouldn't be surprised if those first 3 announcements, we see 3/4 point rate drops. So that'll get us to the point where everybody is expecting us to go, which is from 5%, which is what the overnight rate is, down to 2.5%. That seems to be the sweet spot for most people. And then I think we might see a holding pattern for a little while. The problem is with these predictions is we don't know what's going to happen with the economy. If the Canadian economy continues to struggle, if we start seeing unemployment rates continue to go up, if inflation gets out of hand too, then we might also see rates go back the other directions. All things to be a little bit concerned about, or at least be cognizant of, because you don't want to assume something and then things change. But I don't know. What do you think? Where do you think rates are going to go from your crystal ball?
So get your calendar out quickly. So we got January 29th, March 12th, April 16th, June 4th, June 30th, September 17th, October 29th, and December 10th. I think it's going to be pretty similar to what you said. I can see another 1/4 point in January. I wonder if maybe in March we'll have a little bit more info of what's going on. I know these are typically like, 8 weeks away, 6 weeks away from each other, 6 maybe?
There's 6, because I think there's about 8 per year. So it works out to about 6-ish weeks.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we see another one in January, depending on how things are going. Maybe they skip March and then maybe they have like April and July, maybe space one out a little bit.
Okay.
Just depending on how things are going, as opposed to just, 3 more in a row. And the reason I think that is I feel like there has been 2 larger cuts recently. So that's why I wonder if maybe they hit the pressure release valve and then maybe then from there they kind of peter along a little bit. Am I going to be right? I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I wonder if they're just going to be a little bit more steady as opposed to just kind of continuing to click that valve. What do you think? And again, this is kind of a loaded question. What do you think rates will kind of stabilize at then? So if they're dropping 3/4 points, what do you think variable will end at? I'll let you do the math on that. Then what about fixed? Because that's always been a conversation that we always have. Typically over a long enough time horizon, variable will outperform the fix. And what I mean by that is typically over a long enough time horizon, people that take variable rate mortgages are typically doing better than people that take fixed rate mortgages. Over the last 2 years, 2 and a bit years, the inverse has been true. You
That's
disagree?
Right. No, I shake my head as in it's not been good. Like I'm agreeing with you by shaking my head. Sorry.
Yeah. For listening on the podcast, I know you guys can't see this, but as I was saying that, Cole's making it look like I'm lying or something, but that is the truth. I was right.
Absolutely.
Where do you think things end up?
That's a great question. So assuming variable rates kind of do what we just talked about, that'll put variable rates, depending on the mortgage type, that'll put them in the high 3s in some cases, high 3s to mid 4s if we start, because right now we're kind of mid 4s to 5s is kind of where we're at, depending on, again, the type of variable rate mortgage you take and depending on certain factors. So I think by then we'll start seeing rates be around high 3s to mid 4s for variable rates. And then, like you said, the big question is where do fixed rates go? So as you also mentioned, typically variable rates outperform fixed rates. So if history decides to repeat itself, which typically it does, we'll likely see fixed rates right around that point, if not a bit higher. So right now, for some context, fixed rates are kind of 4.5% to 5%, very similar to what variable rates are. In some cases, you can get lower, like into the low 4s, which is awesome. But I think we'll stabilize fixed rates for this coming year probably. They probably won't change much, to be honest, Austin. I think we'll probably stay around where we're at now, between 4% and 5%, which is a bit of a range for sure. But I think that's where we'll see them. And then we'll see variable be a cheaper. And when I say cheaper, the rate will be lower by about a 0.5 percentage point, I think, is where we'll probably stabilize, which then begs the question, what's the best option for you? And the answer is always the same. It depends on a few different factors. But yeah, I think we'll see variable rates probably stabilize by the middle of the year to around upper 3s to mid 4s, and then fixed rates probably won't shift much unless we see some larger changes in the economy. I'll ask you what you think is going to happen, but I don't know if you have as much insight in terms of what you expect.
No. But I think it would be pretty similar. I do see fixed coming down a little bit, just as they kind of, I know they're unrelated, but just as people or in general, they kind of compare in order to stay competitive. I see the fix going down a little bit. So yeah, if we end up, like you were saying, in the variable rate range, I see fix being like maybe 0.5% to 1% on top of that. And then, when you hear that, if you're thinking that variable might be cheaper than fixed, you're probably asking, okay, why would people take a fixed rate then? Some people really like the certainty of knowing exactly what their payment is going to be each month. And obviously you pay a little bit for that. But yeah, that's kind of, when I look at those two things, that's kind of what I think. I think it'll be like 0.5% higher is what things will kind of stabilize at. So with that being said, if we see rates go down a little bit, where do you think the market goes in 2025?
That's a good question, because we've seen rates come down. We've seen both fixed rates and variable rates come down in 2024. And we have seen an increase in activity in the market, specifically at the end of this year, which makes sense because, again, we're seeing larger rate drops from the variable side now. So more people are incentivized to get in the market. I don't expect the market to go crazy. I don't think that would happen unless it would take a lot of demand for that to happen, because we still have high supply, right? We have lots of inventory. So it would take significant demand for that to happen. I see us being in more of a balanced market. Now, that's maybe a cop out because we're technically in a balanced market right now, but I think we shift more towards a balanced market where both buyers and sellers have more opportunity, I guess. Because right now I would say we're kind of arguably skewed towards the buyer. Would you agree with that a little bit? Like in terms of it's a little bit more advantageous for the buyer right now than maybe it is for the seller.
Yeah.
If you look at it as like at a high level, I see it shifting a little bit towards it being not more advantageous for one side, but much more truly balanced in the fact that sellers, they'll sell their places and buyers will be able to buy places, but it won't be as skewed to one side or the other. That's where I expect us to go, especially as they continue to likely drop variable rates in the start of the year. I see us getting more buyer activity, which will push us to more of a true balanced market, but I don't see it going crazy. What do you think?
I think right now things are advantageous for buyers mostly because supply and demand, like there's a lot of inventory out there. So typically at this time of year, you still have some stuff kicking around. I hate to talk about people's homes like, oh yeah, it's just the leftovers, but you have some of the stuff that you're seeing is getting kind of eaten up, and then other stuff is also like still there. So sometimes those can be stuff that can be stuff that's overpriced. That can be stuff that is, just hasn't found the right buyer for it. Sometimes there's just so much inventory that, the active buyers that are out there can only choose so many things. So there just isn't that demand there. So, typically can I see more people coming out, maybe being ready to be buyers in 2025? Yeah, sure. But a lot of those people that will have, kind of two transactions, that they're selling something and buying something, that's going to basically even out the inventory. So in order to see upward pressure on prices or to change the type of market that we are in to like a seller's market, I think you need to see a lot more buyers come off the sidelines just to kind of eat up that inventory. So, with all that being said, do I see things maybe increasing a little bit? Yeah, sure. I think that, like we talk about, buying a place in the new year is typically a goal for people if they're renting, or maybe they're getting 1 year older and they want to get into their first place. I can definitely see that. But I see things being pretty balanced for 2025. We'll maybe see a small increase in prices, but I wouldn't be surprised even if, it's just like 1% or 2% when everything is said and done. Like I don't see it being anything drastic like we've seen in the past. But yeah, just kind of steady. Some stuff that's super desirable will maybe get picked off quicker, and then some other stuff kind of kicks around. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, that's more or less what I'm thinking. And when we talk in our stats episodes, we often reference sales to active listings ratio. And for some context, I think it's anything below 12% is considered a buyer's market, 12 to 20 is considered balanced, and then anything over 20 is considered a seller's market. So last month we were sitting at about 14%. I could see that pushing a little higher to where we're a little bit more like in the
16. Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm talking about. That's what I'm expecting to see, is more of that, a little bit more in the middle when it comes to a balanced market. I didn't touch on prices, but I think you're right. I don't see prices changing much. I can see that slow kind of grind in terms of prices increasing, because we've actually seen prices drop now for the last 8 months. And when we say drop, they're quite small drops, but I could see that shifting a little bit, where we start to see some either no changes or a little bit of an increase. But yeah, we're going to need more buyers for anything to change. So I think that's a big one. Is there anything that you're anticipating for the new year in terms of like any policy changes? Not to put you too much on the spot, or answer this a different way. Is there anything you'd like to see going into 2025 that might help some people? Or yeah,
I feel like this is kind of cheating, but I remember Kyle mentioning that there will probably be a change to wrongful evictions. I think they're planning most likely to increase the damages that a tenant could go after a landlord for wrongful eviction.
Okay.
Or buyer in some case. So again, if you're a tenant, you get evicted because a buyer wants to, in good faith, move into a place and then they don't meet that requirement. I can see that being extended. I know Kyle kind of alluded to that is what he anticipates might happen, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think just based off of some of the changes and some of the data that they're gathering, I think that'll be something. So that's one. Another thing, is there anything else I can see changing? Put me on the spot here. Not really.
You'd like to see, like, there's any areas where you're like, it'd be really nice if they made a change here. I know that's hard because you're being put on the spot, but maybe like in our past episode, we talked about some of the other things that changed, like first-time homebuyer things that have changed, maybe some new Well, actually, there's one thing we can talk about. Sorry.
I've got one as well, but
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
let's
No,
knock
go
out
ahead,
yours
and then
first.
I'll talk about what I was just thinking.
I'd like to make a change to PTT and decrease it, because I feel like that's just an additional cost. I feel like originally when it was brought in, it was supposed to be like a luxury home kind of tax, but now I just feel like there's such a large substantial portion of property transfer tax that you have to pay on all transactions. So I'd like to maybe have a threshold change for people that are buying and selling within a certain price point, or maybe decrease that amount altogether. Well, I probably can't get rid of it, but no tax ever. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
They're there for a place, but I feel like it was something that was brought in as like a luxury home thing, and then now it just applies to like every transaction. You're paying, depending on the price point, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 grand, and that comes out of down payment. And so that would be one change I would like to have. The chances of that happening are less than zero, but that's just me talking. So how about for yourself?
I think that's great. I want to touch on that. I think that would be awesome to see, because I mean, it's the exemptions that currently exist are tailored towards first-time home buyers. It would be nice to see a full exemption, because we talked about in the last episode where it's only on the first 500 grand. It'd be nice to see a full exemption because if a first-time home buyer wants to buy a townhouse in this where we live, they're not going to get a full exemption, because they're not going to be able to buy something for less than 500 grand. So it'd be nice to see that full exemption get put into place, especially for the first-time home buyer. But the one change I want to see, and actually what I was going to mention to you before, is I'd love to. So they changed the rules for insured mortgages. We've talked about this a couple of times. You can now go up to 1.5 million. I'd love to see them change that for what we in the broker space call insurable mortgages. So what an insurable mortgage is the home. Currently, what it means is if the home is less than $1 million purchase price, it technically could have insurance on it if they wanted to, but they've decided to put more than 20% down. So it's kind of a middle ground for mortgages, and it allows people to get better rates if they buy something under $1 million. They don't have to pay what we call conventional mortgage rates. But right now, that cap is set at $1 million. It didn't get pushed up to 1.5 million in the same way that insured mortgages did. And you also can't get 30-year amortizations on those mortgages either. So those are two things I'd love to see: is a higher price cap for insurable mortgages, and allowing people to go to 30 years amortization as well, because then again, that becomes a much better product for a lot of first-time home buyers that maybe want to put 20% down, or any buyer that wants to put 20% down, quite frankly. But I know that's a big one in my world. A lot of brokers are hoping to see that. So all right, so last thing I kind of want to touch on here, and it's obviously a huge topic, is building more houses. So that's something that the federal government, the provincial governments are all trying to push for. We need more houses. We don't have enough housing. There's been some initiatives put out, especially within BC, to different municipalities to say, hey, these are your goals for building homes. Off the air, before you and I jumped in for this episode, we were talking about how certain municipalities aren't maybe doing what they're supposed to be doing. I won't get into that, but there's a couple things I want to highlight here. So we are building more homes. As of 20 September, we're building homes at a 2% increase compared to last year at the same time, which 2% is great, but it's not obviously what we need.
2%, like an increase is great, but a 2% increase is not great when it's still way lower than it should be.
For sure. And by the end of the year, that number might be different. But if it's not 100% increase, it's probably not a number that most people are happy with. But what I'm concerned about is two things. The Canadian dollar is doing worse, which in part has to do with rates dropping. But also, we're getting a new president in the new year. And he's talked about putting possibly some tariffs in, which could also make the cost of building houses more expensive. I'm not sure what my question for you is, Austin, but I'm wondering, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you see things going in terms of us being able to build enough houses? Because we have the inventory in terms of there's lots of houses out there for people to buy right now, but we arguably still need to build more homes because we have lots of people that aren't living in their own homes. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as I see that, what I also think about is, definitely need to build more. But I also think of some of the news that's been out recently of, developers going under, project starts being down for pre-sales. Like, we're in a housing shortage now. They've made some other changes with immigration and some other things that we could do a whole other episode on. But I think that we're really going to feel this effect more in 2 to 3 years from now, when all of those projects that should be done because of whether the project was started or maybe because of the current climate, what they can charge for pre-sales, as an example, like price per square foot. Like, we're seeing like 800 to 820 for $820 per square foot for some of the new developments, and that's like really, really low in Langley, and a lot of developers can't compete with that. But in order for that project to move, that's what they need to sell for at this time. So a lot of developers can't afford to build right now because they can't sell at those prices, so they're just holding off on their projects basically until the market gets better. And as like we've kind of chatted about, as much as we're hoping that happens, and we think that there's some reasons that maybe we should see a little bit of upward pressure on prices, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. And then to circle back, based off of everything that you're talking about, that's going to make things even more expensive to build. So I feel like we're, on the hamster wheel, just going around in circles on this. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot of competing things at play here, and some are pulling things in the right direction, some are pulling things in the wrong direction. And until we kind of get a clear direction of, okay, things are getting better or things are definitely getting worse, we're not going to know where things are going to shift. Developers are going to continue to build. As you mentioned, it's not all developers. Is it going to make sense for all developers to build at this time? Maybe they hold out a little bit longer, but they're also holding on to land that they're paying for, right? Unless they own it without any loans on that land, any mortgage of any kind, which most of the time they do have some sort of financing on it, it's costing them money to sit with that land, right? So there's a lot of different factors at play here. And the big one for me, and I said this already, is the Canadian dollar being weak is not good, because it means that anything that a developer needs to purchase for materials, and if those materials are coming from out of country, which a lot of times they can be, they're going to have to pay more for it because the dollar gets weaker. It's concerning, especially because we have such high objectives when it comes to building more homes. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in 2025 from a political standpoint, simply because that may pave the way for the direction that things go in the housing market. Now, if we have a new political party in power in 2025, does that mean all of a sudden the housing market's going to change? No, things don't happen like that. They take time to develop, but it will change people's sentiment. And that's something that we talk about a lot, is buyers and seller sentiment is arguably the most important factor when it comes to what's going to happen with the market. Because even if rates are the lowest they've ever been and prices are the best they've ever been, if people don't want to buy, it doesn't matter, because they have to want to buy. And that goes back to the supply and demand thing. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be a bit of not a grind in 2025, but much more of it might look kind of similar to this year, maybe a little bit more. There'll be more optimism, I think, going into 2025, but I don't know if we'll see massive changes when it comes to how the market operates.
As long as it's, I think people are just looking for, like, I don't want to say the word predictable, but just a little bit more consistency. Like, now I feel like prices have been where they've been for a long enough period of time. You feel very confident when you're giving prices to people and what they should be buying or selling for. When I compare that to, like, even the peak of the market, it was like, okay, what did the last one in your complex sell for? Well, market's going up, it'll be north of that, but again, very different scenario. And then even after that, when we saw the prices going down, it was like, yeah, your neighbor might have sold 40 grand more or 40 grand higher than I'm telling you, but that's where the goalpost has shifted, right? So I just feel like things are just kind of tighter and it's a lot more predictable and consistent. I think that would be a great goal for 2025. So
yeah, I think that's a great thing to say. Consistency would be nice. It allows people to have a little bit of predictability. I think that's a good word, honestly, because if I can know that in a week's time from now, the price hasn't shifted by 10% because the market's going crazy, that gives me a bit more peace of mind to make a decision and not have to rush to the decision that I'm trying to make. So I think that's great. In terms of other things for 2025, I'm looking forward to the podcast. I don't know if I can say this, apologies if I can't. We're going to be bringing this to YouTube very soon. That's going to be our next big step. We've made some big steps this year in terms of getting this to a visual medium. We're starting to put out more short clips, which we're going to definitely be even more diligent about in 2025. So that's something to look forward to. And yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to in 2025 from this perspective of this podcast. Is we're going to continue to bring the information, and we're going to continue to find different ways to get ourselves out there and present that information.
Yeah, I think it's been great. Even just, more recently, I've been chatting with some of our audience, people mentioning, "Hey, listen to the podcast all the time. It's great. We love what you do." We've gotten some feedback as well of maybe some things to do, like turn up our mics and just make sure that we're clear, like little stuff like that. That seems kind of important. But it's great to kind of hear that not only as our audience, I don't want to say to your average person that maybe works full time, wants to know what's going on in the market, but also other realtors that are listening to us, trying to see what we have to say. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. This is the highlight, or one of the highlights of my week each week, hopping on with Cole and being able to chat about the market and updates and what's going on. I'm really excited. We've got some great guests that we have planned for the new year, and we're always looking to diversify that too. And I think 2025 will have a lot more intention with what we're doing from episode to episode. We always try and provide value and be the type of podcast that we would listen to. So just, looking to provide more value to you guys that are listening, and continue to, learn and learn with you. And it's a great way to put it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to 2025, and I'm looking forward to seeing how wrong we were about our predictions again.
Yes. Yeah, start and finish humbly. We were wrong, and we will be wrong again. But yeah, thanks for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you next week.